Hey guys, welcome back to the Deathunter channel, and in today's video, I'm going to teach you how to solve quadratic equations in Python, and trust me, it's super easy. So let's first take a look at the code here. The first step, like any other Python program, is to import something, and here we're importing regular expressions as expressed using re. And then we're going to define a couple of functions. The first function we're going to define is the square rooting function. And this is necessary because obviously square rooting is required while doing quadratic equations, and Python doesn't have it built in. So here basically we're telling the function to return whatever you put in to the 0.5th power. It's quite simple. And the next function we're gonna define is the quadratic formula function. Here is the quadratic formula, and we're basically going through it step by step, and I'm not going to deliberately go through it, like explain it too much, because it's quite easy. I'm just walking through the equation the whole time here. Yeah, and we're having two of the formulas because obviously a quadratic equation has a positive root and then a negative root, and we're trying to cover both of them here. And then we're going to move on to the equation part. There are two ways of doing it. We either have an inputted equation from the user, or we can just use the coefficients, which is a method for the lazy people, huh? We're doing it the pretty way here. We're telling the user to input something, an equation in this format: ax to the second power plus bx plus c. And as you can notice here, we have a lot of spaces in between the the elements. And we do that because later we're trying to use the split statement to split this into a list, so we can then access each of the elements. And then, as aforementioned, we are splitting the equation into a list. So basically, equation.split, and you can call this whatever you want to. Notice here we have this string variable, so we are turning this to a string, which may sound counterintuitive because we're working with numbers, we're working with an equation, but why are we turning it to a string? And that is because later we're going to use the regular expressions method to extract some of the coefficients, and we cannot do so if we're not having a string, which is kind of weird for regular expressions. And the next step is obviously fetching the coefficients using the regular expressions extraction method, re.findall. So you don't need to know how to do this. Just copy this statement and then segmented equation, which signifies like from which element or variable we're extracting the variables from. And then the next variable we're going to define is quadratic coefficient, which is basically the first number that pops up in that list. Because in a quadratic equation, for example, 5x squared plus 4x plus 2 equals 0. The first coefficient, or the first number that pops up in the computer, will be 5, which is going to be the quadratic coefficient. And then the linear coefficient, which in my example will be 4. And then the constant, obviously, is the 2, or the third number in the list. And notice here we're using the float statement because we want to convert the string into a float, which is integer plus decimals, like whatever numbers, because otherwise we won't be able to calculate it later in our function. And now let's move on to the results. So the results are basically calling the functions, so quadratic formula, and the conditions are quadratic coefficient, linear coefficient, and constant, which replaces the ABCs and JKLs in the functions we defined above. It's pretty simple. And last but not least, we're printing the results. And here I'm choosing to make it a little prettier by using the new line statement. So new line, the results are another new line, x1 equals to result 1, the positive root, and space, white space here, and x2 equals space results 2, which is going to be the negative root. And now let's take it for a run in our console. So clear, we're going to run this. So let's use an example, an easy one first. So 4x to the second power space plus space 4x space plus space 1 equals 0. So let's see what happens. Quite easily, the results are x1 equals minus 0.5 and x2 equals to, so basically it's the same thing, because what we have here, the delta equals to 0, so essentially there's only one root. But according to our program, we still have two roots because we're taking into account like the other situations. So right here, we're gonna do another try. So we run this again and use the example we had before. So 5x to the second power plus 4x plus 2 was it equals to 0. And the results are, you can see here's the string of numbers. You might think this is an error, but actually it's not. The J is actually to be supposed to be the math symbol I, which is something that you'll encounter later. So yeah, take a look at this. It's the same thing, ain't it? So that's it for this lesson or this video, and I hope you have enjoyed the video, and I hope that y'all have something to take in and learn from. Thank you very much.